Hi guys, Ray here from City Fan TV, and I've got Bobby Seagull in the house. Now, Bobby is not a Brighton fan. Bobby is a West Ham fan. How you doing, Bobby?
I'm good, thank you, Ray.
Come on, you Irons. And look, we were supposed to be talking, we'd arranged this chat to talk about the game between Man City and West Ham in the FA Women's Super League, the women's game. Sadly, that's been postponed. And so what we're going to do instead, we're going to talk about why it's been postponed and it's COVID reasons, and a lot more about COVID and how it's affecting the women's game and stuff like that. And right at the end, we'll talk a little bit about the West Ham documentary, because some of you guys might have seen that on the BBC. I saw that, I think, last year. Very, very interesting. So, Bobby, do you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself? And you're there, you've got your badge on, you've got your is that a West Ham shirt? Is that a West Ham jacket as well?
I don't away kit there,
yeah. So do you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got into West Ham?
Yeah, so I'm actually Mr. Seagull. I'm a school maths teacher. Although you can call me Bobby, of course. Yeah, I am.
I'll call you sir. I'll call you sir.
Call me sir. You can call me sir if you want. Normally, you have to get knighted. See, one of the great things about teaching is you don't have to get knighted to be called a sir. Yeah. I'm an author of a couple of books, presenter for the BBC series Monkman and Seagull's Genius Guides, and I sort of had my sort of lucky break into the media by being a captain of Emmanuel College, Cambridge and University Challenge about 4 years back nearly. And since then, I've been working in the media, mainly promoting maths, education, reading. But I'm a huge football fan. I'm from East Ham. So naturally, a Hammers fan. We've had season tickets to the men's team for the best part of 2 decades. Even in my back garden, we've got some of the old stuff from Upton Park there. So I'm a huge Hammers fan. And I'm also an ambassador, education ambassador for West Ham Football Club, and even do work with the Premier League, using maths as a way to get young people into not just football, but right all the way around from football into maths. So I'm a big education and sports fan.
Fantastic. I've got to say, my background is started off as a maths graduate, but I try and teach my kids, but they don't want to know from me. It's sometimes it doesn't work if you try and teach your kids maths. They don't mind it from a different teacher, but not their old man. They say I'm too good, too clever for them. I don't know what that means, but anyway. Yeah, we're gonna talk about obviously the main subject today because of the postponement. The postponement between for the game was because of the COVID situation. I think I'll give some of the background and then I'll ask you for some of your opinions, Bobby. Now we've seen in the news in the last week or so. This is just on the women's side, plenty on the men's side as well, but just focusing initially on the women's side, we've seen. Dubai seems to be the place to be if you want to catch COVID. London or Dubai. We've seen Manchester City players in Dubai, photos of them. We've seen Arsenal players in Dubai. We've seen photos of them. Other places too. It's not just those clubs, but it seems to be Dubai. Seems to be the COVID magnet attracting our footballers and helping them to get ill. Now, Arsenal. I think Arsenal came out and said their players went on a business trip, which people find extremely difficult to accept. Business trip. You're footballers, and yes, you might have outside businesses, but I don't think, was it 3 of them went? It doesn't ring true. The Man City players went on holiday, which was, I believe, sanctioned by the club. Club said you could go. Mm-hmm. Arsenal players were in tier 4, City players were in tier 3. I don't know, whether you can argue it's legal or moral. I think we'll discuss that. So I think that's possibly where we should start before the reasons for the postponement, and then how other clubs don't seem to get postponements. So what do you think about all the players going in such a difficult time and sometimes sanctioned or defended by the club?
Yeah, I think it's, again, there's something that's legally allowed by footballing laws and national laws, and then things which you say morally is allowed. And again, legally, if the club's given permission and you're within, so those air bridges, yeah, and it's a sanctioned tier to go to Dubai, yeah, so legally you're not breaking any laws. But you have to think about it morally. If you're playing in a, obviously incredibly difficult times for the country, and football, elite football, is being given a special permission to play. So again, I can't go and play 5-a-side kickabout with my mates or 11-a-side Sunday league. Yeah, we're giving elite footballers in the Premier League men's and the women's WSL permission to play. So they need to think they've got a bigger responsibility than just thinking about business trips or holiday trips. And again, fine, they haven't broken the letter of the law possibly, and I don't think they have, but they should think of a wider responsibility to football and the women's game, because now we are seeing games being cancelled, COVID being caught by players and teams, Arsenal, Man City. And I think it's a question of people taking a seat back and go, I am privileged enough to play WSL. I'm looked upon by, many people across the country as, elite sports leader. I should treat that with privilege and responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I think actually I was reading something on social media today. The FA have apparently told the clubs, if you don't punish your players, we will. It sounds a bit odd because the FA are the ones who are agreeing to the postponement of games. Now, I just want to say the Man City players have had permission from the club, and I found that odd. Knowing what I understand about the situation, I spent the last 9 or 10 months spending many hours a day, and the guys on the channel know I've got most of my family work in the healthcare system, and I've worked with doctors for 20 odd years, and I've worked in the NHS myself. So, but I'm just wondering what advice the clubs are getting from either the FA, whether they approach the government or their own doctors. My feeling is the doctors are the more general doctors rather than, they're not virologists, they're not maybe well up. And as I said, I know from my own family, you might be a surgeon, but you don't know anything about COVID. You don't know and you might not be much more aware of the risks than the general public. So I just can't believe clubs haven't looked into this a lot more, and said it's not a sensible thing to do. It's a risk to go, out of the country, should self-isolate back at home. So I don't know what you feel about that, whether the clubs have more responsibility. It's up to the players to be morally responsible, but it's up to the clubs to be morally responsible and have a duty of care to the players and to the game at large.
Again, as a school teacher, I often think, and I'm trying to draw an analogy, again, my job as a teacher is to provide them as much education as possible, give them the websites, revision guides, classes, tips, all those things. But I think ultimately responsibility should come from the individual, the student. If you work hard, follow the teacher's instructions, you'll do well. But it's your responsibility. I would say like the concept of taking personal responsibility. So the club might sanction you and say, yep, it's a official business trip for the club. Again, that is dubious, not whether it's a business trip. But if the club says yes, you still need to take personal responsibility because you're going when there's still a global pandemic going on, whether a country is allowed to visit or not. And you're coming back and you don't know what sort of interactions you've had. And then you've got your club, you've got other teammates that you're responsible to, the league as a wider concern as well. So one, I say is individual players should think about their personal responsibility. But secondly, I think that the FA should step in because obviously, individual clubs are run in different ways and they've got different tierings, but the governing body, they should make a stance and say, this is the level of fine or this is the punishment, this is a sanction if your clubs break it. And again, we've seen it in the men's side as well. I think giving clubs responsibility means you're going to see different reactions. Some clubs will be very tough, other clubs will be lenient. And then you might imagine like Bristol City gave a much tougher stance than let's say Arsenal did. Then someone neutral will say, that's unfair. The Bristol City player got punished. And I don't think any Bristol players have broken the law, sort of COVID rules, but they'll say, why are they being punished more? So there should be like a central governance of this because it is a national crisis. It's not a localized crisis.
Yeah, well, that's right. How many clubs are going to punish themselves by punishing their players severely? Is someone like Man City who had 4 players out with COVID, are they going to say, right, you 4, we're going to ban you for the next 6 games? It's not going to happen. You need something consistent from the governing body. Now, we talked about the postponement, so let's look at that. Man City's game has been postponed, Arsenal's as well. And there's a lot of gnashing of teeth because earlier in the season, Bristol City, they had 5 players out. Now, they were, if I'm right, they were self-isolating. They hadn't tested I think they were going through the testing process. They hadn't tested negative, so they were self-isolating only. And I think actually, I'm not sure if all of them tested negative, but they had to play. So they had to have academy players either on the bench or either on the pitch. And Bristol City at that point were in a bad run of form. I think they played 5 games, got spanked pretty much in all of them. They scored 1 goal, letting I think 20 goals in 5 games. I think one of them was about Arsenal, and Arsenal smashed them. I think it was Arsenal or Chelsea. And then they had to play Man City in this state, and City won 8-1. And people are saying, well, how can Bristol City be forced to play? And, you know, with 5 players out, Manchester City have got 4 players out, Arsenal have got 3 players out. What's going on? And then I've just read this afternoon that apparently Birmingham have been denied by the FA. They wanted to postpone their game because apparently they've only got 10 available players due to injury. Yeah. Not COVID, injury. And they're told they have to play. Now, a little bit of background on City, and Arsenal, why they've been postponed. Arsenal apparently have got players in self-isolation. Well, isn't that what Bristol had? Man City have got mitigating circumstances. So I think we've got 2 long-term injuries, 4 people out with COVID. I know we've got the 2 American players, Rose Lavelle and Sam Ewis. They're with the US women's national team. But it does look a little bit odd. Like Bristol City don't get anything. Birmingham City don't get any leeway. Man City and Arsenal, yeah, you want the games postponed? Yeah, let's do it. What do you think? Does it sound fair?
Yeah, the thing is, again, if someone's new to women's football and they're looking at the league table, they're going, okay, so the clubs who are right near the top are being given leniency. The clubs who are struggling near the 12th, 11th, 10th position, they're not being given leniency. And again, to me, it strikes me as power dynamics of the league. If you're the governing body, it seems like, again, as someone that, obviously I'm a West Ham fan, but looking at it from a neutral perspective, they are showing more favorable terms to the more powerful, wealthy clubs in the WSL. And then that double standards can be frustrating for other clubs because they're like, we're being treated in one way and we've sort of put our case forward why we need a postponement, and yet other clubs are not being given the same treatment. And I think it just can leave a bitter taste in fans and the governance of those particular clubs, because they'll probably pick up the phone again. We'll talk about the documentary later, the BBC documentary. A couple of times where West Ham had a lot of players out through injury, and they're trying to call up, saying, "Oh, the referee, the FA saying, oh, we got loads of players out. Can we get a postponement?" But if you're the big clubs, I'm guessing the phone will get picked up. So it does make people feel like, is the league there for all clubs, or is it there for certain elite clubs?
Yeah, exactly. I think we talked off air, who drives the, let's say the TV business, who drives, it's going to be the big clubs. And it does feel like they're getting an unfair advantage. I'm just looking through my notes. So yeah, Bristol seems to be, I think, ones that had done by, because they didn't deliberate on. I mean, I'm not saying Man City and Arsenal have deliberately gone out to get COVID or anything, but you look at the Bristol one, and it was just unlucky. On the surface, we don't know the full stories, but it just feels unlucky that that they were self-isolating just in case, and they were hit hard. Whereas you could argue Arsenal and City players have been a little bit more reckless. It just seems more obvious, looking on the face of it, that they've been a bit reckless and the others haven't. It just seems unfair. And also, you've got this situation. We had it before, a lockdown, and we ended up with no Women's Super League games. There was no restart like in the men's game because, if truth be told, there's no money in it. That's the reason. It would cost so much for the testing system and the protocols and everything that it just wasn't financially worth it. So it was called off. But you've got a lot of problems, and as well with training. During lockdown, where the men's academies could carry on, but the women's teams couldn't. That doesn't seem fair. And also you got this, it looks a ludicrous situation where you got early rounds of the FA Cup. If a team can't put out, if a club can't put out a team, it might be decided because of COVID or whatever. It might be decided on the toss of a coin. Now, I think if you're a captain, just make sure that the other captain doesn't say heads I win, tails you lose. Otherwise, you're going to lose every time. That's an old Friends episode. If you're that old and you remember them. But what do you think? I mean, is women's football getting hard done by? And men's football, they're not going to toss a con in a men's game generally. So is it once again? Is it fair?
Yeah. Again, an external person looking at it and they don't know anything about the men's game or women's game, they'll say it looks like economics is talking, because the Premier League, again, they started off quite, they finished off the season. The WSL, we had to have a points per game situation, which meant that, there's certain teams that could have won, could Man City have won the title had they played the rest of the season. But in the men's game, we saw they completed it all. And I think it's very clear that, and again, they'll never publish it, but it's clear because they know that the men's game brings huge revenues for the broadcasters. Many people watch it, whereas the women's game doesn't quite bring it yet. At some stage, I'm hoping it will do. But right now, they're thinking, actually, we can postpone, we can delay, we can cancel the season or finish the season off. So it's clearly, again, if you're someone that's trying to promote the sport, get people into it, it makes people think, you're not really respecting women's football by giving it different standards. And again, I understand the economics of it, but it does show clear disparity when the men's elite game is given the time to complete it, whereas the women's game is like, we're going to cut the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think finally on this point, we've heard the West Ham captain Jill Flaherty. She's come out and there's a couple of players who've actually had their say and talks about privilege and talks about responsibility. And I think she mentioned something about apologies. The players that have gone off there and got some of them have been lucky, have come back, and I think the Man United captain, Katie Zellum, I think she'd been to Dubai, she's come back negative. Others have been and come back positive. Have they a responsibility to fans and the game to apologise? I know some of the Arsenal players are very unhappy with their teammates for going and getting COVID. So should they all come out and apologise?
Yeah, I think firstly, we'll say people do make mistakes. We've seen in COVID, whether you're senior politicians who end up in Barnard Castle or individual people who, end up meeting three people in the park instead of two, whatever the rules are. I think people make mistakes, but I think it shows that you're quite big in character if you come out and say, actually, yep, I did make a mistake, I'm sorry, rather than pretending you didn't and sort of being sanctimonious and saying, our club gave us permission. So when Jill Flaherty caused a bit of social media stir, she put out, I think on Twitter, it's been picked up by a few of the media outlets, The Guardian, and they talked about how Jill Flaherty is saying that, women's football has obviously grown significantly because when she first started football, she had multiple jobs. She thinks she's a locksmith. Yeah. Even got her own cryo business now. So she's also thinking about the future beyond football. But now it's a professional league. I think it's the only still fully professional league or the first professional league in Europe for women's football. So people in the league need to accept the responsibility that comes with that. And if that means apologizing, I think they should do, rather than sort of cowering behind the club's PR and the club's official stance. Say, I'm sorry, guys, I made a mistake. I realized, in these difficult times, I shouldn't have probably done that, even though I was technically allowed. So I think, her saying an apology is warranted, I think is the right thing.
You're right. I think it would have made a huge difference if the players had just come out and say, look, like you said, we were given permission. We thought it was safe. So we went. And unfortunately, we got it wrong. And the club should come out and say, we got it wrong. Not like, Pep coming out and his defense of, and I criticised it, the defense of Ben Mendy for having a New Year's party, which was against the rules, I think, with the people that were there. And Pep tried to defend it by his, saying it was his girlfriend or his friends or whatever. He's a great guy. He's a lovely guy. No. I know you're not going to throw the guy under the bus, but you can criticise in a way without going on too long about it and just say, yes, I think he did wrong. He's come out and apologised. Let's move on. Yeah. And, people make mistakes. He's apologised and move on. But he just turned it around into, he's a lovely guy and he works so hard and he's nice in the dressing room. We don't need to know that because, it's like a politician. just come out and apologise, say you did it wrong, and actually mean it. And then people are more likely to forgive you and accept what you've done. They might not be happy, but you move on. And what's happened is in the last 4 or 5 days, we haven't moved on. That's why we're having the conversation about it. That's why there's lots of articles in the papers. And people like Jill Flaherty and others, other professionals are having their say as well. I think we've had it in America, that some of the professionals, someone said something as well. So that's the COVID situation, guys. And hopefully, we will be able to finish the women's season this time round, I hope. And same with the men's. But we're going to move on to talk about the West Ham United documentary, because that was something we would have talked about if we were doing a normal preview. And it's interesting, you mentioned Gilly Flaherty's cryo business. I thought from watching that documentary that she was selling the cryo business because I think the machine was about 30 grand or something. But if I remember correctly. So, but anyway, just to show that I have watched it. I did watch it, I just had a quick glance, but I did watch it last year. So if you guys, I guess it's still available on the BBC iPlayer if you want to go and check that out. I thought it's very interesting, whether you want to call it a fly on the wall, kind of look at what the inner workings of West Ham United's women's team. And it was very interesting to see the season. And it is, I find it anyway, when I watch stuff like that, you are rooting for the team, unless it's Man United or Spurs or Liverpool. The Spurs one, I watched theirs and I just laughed all the way through when they were losing. It's just no. But for the West Ham United women's team, I was rooting for them. But how do you think that series portrayed the club? How did the club come out of it?
So the documentary is called Britain's Youngest Boss, and the second one is Squad Goals, and it follows Jack Sullivan and the West Ham women's team when they moved from the third division, being an amateur club, to being professional. And people that don't know who Jack Sullivan is, he's the managing director of the club, became the youngest director, I think it's 17 or 18, and his dad is the owner of West Ham United. And the great thing is he's quite honest and admits, I wouldn't have been in this position if it wasn't for my dad. But I think the key thing is he's worked hard, because you can see in this documentary, he really wants it. He really wants to push the West Ham Women's Club. He really wants to also support women's football in general. And you can see that he could be, like he's only 17, 18, or about 19, 20 now. But the next 10, 15, 20 years could become one of the people in Britain that really drives women's football to become mainstream, to the point where people might be playing, £10 pay-per-view. I don't think pay-per-view is a great idea because he didn't do well in lockdown, but he's the sort of person that can help drive the commercial side of the women's game. But again, before watching the documentary, I watch women's football, but it tended to be at internationals. Again, the 2015, 2019 World Cup. Again, I supported England, hoping we'd beat the US in the semi-final, but the US are like our next level when it comes to women's football. But since then, I was like, okay, women's football looks interesting. I'm a football fan. And again, I'm a huge Hammers fan. My family have got a couple of season tickets there. And I watched this documentary. I'm like, actually, I can now not just support the men's team, I can follow the women's team. So it's really got me into women's football, and perhaps, in this conversation with you.
Yeah, fantastic. Do you talked about obviously the two series. Do you think it's brought you as a fan? Has it brought lots of other new fans? Do you know the numbers, or is it just a feeling that there are obviously a lot more fans who are coming to games and interested in West Ham United's women's team?
Yeah, so I think it's obviously, as a West Ham fan, I obviously want lots of people to go get season tickets at the club, which will support the business and the development of the club. But more than that, even, it's about women's football. I think 1.3 million people are watching the first season. So these are people that don't necessarily watch women's football, but now they're like, actually, this does seem like an interesting sporting proposition. And we've seen this year the amount of coverage that the BBC put on, again, on their website. Again, I have not been able to watch all our games live, but on the BBC website, you go there, you look up any game, and you can find the highlights from the good ones, like when we beat Bristol 4-0, but they're also the bad ones where we lost 9-1 to Arsenal. They're all there on its glory on the BBC site. And I think partly because of this documentary with Jack and the women's team, because it's brought interest into the game. And often what you see with sort of minority sports, if I can call it, because women's football isn't a majority sport at the moment, things like the World Cup get people excited, but how do you continue that momentum? And I think the documentaries helped with that. And now we've got WSL, getting new teams, that even Man United, and as a Man City fan, Man United are now doing well at WSL. So the more we get big large clubs interested in WSL and women's football, I think we can drive it through. Because my prediction is, okay, now we're 2021. I think in the next 10, 15, 20, okay, by 2050, as the age is away, 2050, I think women's football will be pretty much the same level as men's football because it's a growth industry. And again, I used to work in investment banking before I became a teacher. And the men's game, amazing as it is a saturated industry. You're not suddenly going to develop new people that love the game. Whereas women's, it's a huge growth market.
Yeah, you're right. The men's game, on our channel, we talk a lot about finances whenever we get a chance. And you can see, the men's game are losing. Now, COVID's not helped, but the Chinese deal, that was a £500 million deal over 3 years, I think. Other deals, it feels like everything's going to get smaller. It's going to go down, and the league is struggling. One of the reasons they don't want to let Messi go is because without Ronaldo, they've got a deal coming up. I think, is it next summer they're doing a deal? Well, if you've not got Neymar, Ronaldo, and Messi, who's going to be paying the big bucks for your deal? No one's in. A lot of the players, they're exciting, but they're not. If the big stars, as I said, those three, if Haaland's not there, the big stars are in Spain, then why would broadcasters pay big money? I think the French one has just gone down because one of the broadcasters, was it RM? I'm trying to remember the name now. Media Pro, MedPro. They went. So they've had to, with Canal Plus, they've done a new deal which is worth £265 million less than the old deal. So it feels like the men's game is contracting in terms of broadcasting rights. But the women's game, it's ripe for development, and we've seen that. Not this season, the previous season, in the first game of the season, Man City versus United, they played at the big Etihad Stadium, over 30,000 fans. I think was it Spurs and Chelsea had 37,000. So you had some big numbers. Okay, it drops off because we had 30,000 1 week. 2 weeks later, we had about 1,200 or 1,500, and it's trying to keep that momentum going. And you're right. It's there. It's the one that's going to develop, and it's a growth industry, which is why suddenly teams have been propelled into the Premier League. It's why Man United formed a team. There's interest, and there's going to be some money in this. Let's be clear. There's going to be money in it soon. Yeah. And it's why City. I don't think City got in it for the money, but when City were formed as reformed in the 2014 or rebranded, we were propelled into the Premier League because we were one of the big boys. I think I said at the time, it didn't feel right that Doncaster Bells had to go down when they shuffled it around. So but once again, we're back talking about big clubs getting favourable deals. I think my last question on the West Ham documentary then is: would you want to see another series? Is it possible? I suspect it's not because of the COVID situation to do it the way it's done before. But would you want to see this carry on for your club West Ham, or you think 2 series that's enough?
So again, as a biased West Ham fan, I'd love to see another season. Again, I watched both seasons of the documentary. You can see that they're getting more in depth because the camera crew, the production crew understand the values of West Ham. So personally, Jack, if you're watching, get a 3rd season. I'd love to see it. But also, I think again, in football, we've seen like Juventus do a documentary, Spurs. Did Man United do one? Did Jose? Who else?
No one's interested in them. No one's interested in Man City did one.
You see, Man City, I beg your pardon, Pep. Yeah. So we've seen, how am I getting them confused? We've seen in football more than one club getting involved. So with WSL, I'd love to see other clubs getting involved as well. Maybe City, maybe like the historical power of Arsenal. Like I've got a couple of friends who support Arsenal and WSL, and they're saying that, Arsenal were like dominant and now everyone else is starting to catch up. So I'd love to see other clubs getting involved as well.
Yeah, they don't need to worry. I don't think anybody's going to catch up to Arsenal. What they've won in the
14,
WSL, it's incredible. Bobby, I'm going to say, I'm going to round it up there and say massive thanks for coming on today. Obviously, without not having the game, it's a bit of a downer because we just had the winter break and we're all looking forward to the season carrying on and building up to that climax where you've got United, Arsenal, Chelsea, and City fighting for the top spot. I think Bristol City are probably gone, and then just to shuffle everybody. But we're all waiting for it, and it's all disappeared now. Is there anywhere where people can find you, Bobby, if they want to go and check out some of the stuff you've done?
Okay. Oh, sorry, So on social media, I've got this here, at Bobby_Seagull. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And if you use YouTube, mostly educational stuff, at Bobby Seagull TV. But generally, like, I post about education and quite positive, a lot of football, quite a bit of West Ham, but a lot of positive stuff.
I'll check you out. I'll check you out and try and get my kids to try and learn some more maths from Bobby Seagull. I mean, they're going to make fun of your name. I'm sorry about that. It just happens.
That's fine. I don't mind it.
But Bobby, thanks so much, and hopefully, when we do get the games on again, we'll have another chat and we'll talk this time.
Hopefully, we can get revenge for that FA Cup defeat.
Well, hopefully next time we'll talk about football rather than what's preventing football from taking place. Thanks a lot, Bobby.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.